Tonight we're stepping into the grand, echoing halls of ancient Rome, not as a conqueror, not as a gladiator, but as a Roman senator. You stand still for a second, your gaze drawn upward to dizzying arches and columns so tall they seem to scrape the heavens. The light filters in through high windows and dances across the polished marble floor beneath you. There's a quiet dignity to this place, an almost reverent hush. But right now, you're not thinking about speeches or politics. No. You're thinking about your feet. They're cold. Not freezing, but there's definitely a chill. Because all that's between you and the floor is a thin strip of leather. Sandals. Always sandals. Every time. Indoors. Out in the forum. Even during winter, if you're bold enough. And tonight, you're going to find out why. You probably won't survive this. By the way, at least not if you were really a Roman senator. Politics in this city is blood sport with scrolls and gladius blades. Still, it's a nice fantasy. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening from somewhere far from Rome, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you all tune in from. Now, dim the lights, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shift your weight slightly, hearing the soft creak of your sandals against the stone. They're finely made, with supple leather straps wrapping around your feet like a second skin. But more than comfort or style, they send a message. You are not some sweaty laborer with boots covered in dust. You are not barefoot like a lowly slave. You are not shuffling around in thick wool socks like your Greek tutor. You are a Roman senator. Your feet must be seen. The floors here are cold because they can be. This is the Curia Julia, the Senate house rebuilt under Caesar himself. Heated floors? Ha! That's for future empires. Here, the stone stays cool and smooth, an eternal contrast to the fire raging in your chest as you prepare to speak. And the sandals? They make just enough sound to let others know you're moving, without screaming for attention. That rhythmic scuff slap on stone has a dignity to it, a kind of slow drumbeat of power. The marble isn't just there to look nice. It reflects status. The entire building is a monument to control, to empire, to wealth extracted from half the known world. And your sandals, small, soft, almost forgettable, fit into that puzzle perfectly. Because in Rome, what you didn't wear could matter even more than what you did. Historians still argue whether senators had an explicit dress code for footwear indoors. But what we do know is this: there was an unspoken rule. A code of appearance, reinforced by tradition and peer pressure, if not by the letter of law. And in that code, sandals meant order, hierarchy, and Romanness. Nothing more. Nothing less. The specific kind most senators wore were called solii, simple sandals with open toes and leather soles. No heels, no adornments. You wouldn't dare show up in something too flashy. Even the emperor had to play the humility game sometimes. And while everyone likes to believe Roman politics was all about brilliant oratory and grand ideas, it was also about appearances. You think your sandals don't matter? Try tripping on the steps before addressing the Senate. You'll be mocked in 3 different dialects by dinner. But the story of these sandals begins much earlier. Back before Caesar, before Cicero, even before the Republic. Back in the time when Romans were just another scrappy tribe trying to survive in a land full of bigger bullies. Back then, barefoot was the norm. Sandals were for warriors, messengers, and the occasional chieftain showing off. Over time, as Rome expanded and absorbed Greek aesthetics, Egyptian materials, and Etruscan habits, the sandal evolved. You bend down slightly now, discreetly, and adjust a strap that's been digging into your heel. The leather's softened with time, but still catches your skin if it shifts the wrong way. It's oddly intimate, really, how something so small can shape the way you move, stand, even think. It's the kind of detail that gets overlooked in the statues and dramas. But here, in the real Rome, your feet are part of the conversation. There's a senator across the chamber you can't stand. You won't say it out loud, but the man wears his sandals like he's never walked more than 2 paces in them. Too tight, too high, too clean. Like they're part of a costume. You wonder how many hours his slaves spent buffing them to a mirror shine. And you smirk, just a little. Because that's the trick. Senators may debate great issues, but their eyes are scanning every toe and stitch. You glance up at the domed ceiling, feeling the distant rumble of footsteps echoing through the stone. Someone's late. Maybe they're making an entrance. Maybe they're having a sandal emergency. It happens more than you'd think. There are jokes in the forum about senators who kept backup pairs hidden in their togas. You never know when a broken strap might become a political crisis. Quirky, sure, but true. And yet there's something almost poetic about it. The same empire that paved entire continents with stone roads, the same empire that built aqueducts, coliseums, and bathhouses, never quite gave up the humble sandal. Even as boots became standard issue for soldiers, even as heels came and went in other cultures, the Roman senator stayed loyal to the open toe. Some say it was tradition. Others claim it was symbolic, a way of saying, "Look, I have nothing to hide." No shoes to conceal weapons. No heavy soles to stomp and intimidate. Just soft, worn leather and bare skin. But historians still argue whether it was that noble or just an accident of comfort that became codified over centuries. Either way, you shift again, stretching your toes slightly against the marble. The session is about to begin. You hear murmurs, rustling scrolls, the occasional cough. And as you rise to speak, your sandals whisper across the floor. Not loud. Just enough. You're not just walking. You're announcing yourself. You're still standing, though now, maybe your feet are getting a little too acquainted with the stone beneath them. No rugs. No padding. Just bare sandal against ancient marble. And as you adjust your stance, the faintest thought flutters through your mind. Didn't Rome once have rules about this? Oh yes. Sumptuary laws. You've heard of them. Maybe you even rolled your eyes when your uncle ranted about them at a dinner party. They were Rome's favorite way to look moral while staying indulgent. Laws designed to regulate excess, how much gold you could wear, how purple your toga could be, and yes, what kind of footwear was appropriate. Supposedly. You glance around the Senate chamber. If anyone is following those rules to the letter, they're doing it by accident. Because here's the thing about sumptuary laws, they existed less to be enforced and more to make a point. They were Rome's way of pretending to despise luxury while swimming in it. Sandals. Those fell somewhere in the grey zone. Technically, there were times when more modest footwear was encouraged. Laws like the Lex Oppia, passed during the Second Punic War, limited women's use of luxurious items, including certain types of shoes. While that law was eventually repealed after loud protests and some theatrical standoffs in the Forum, it reflected Rome's obsession with regulating appearances in the name of virtue. Now, for men like you, senators, the rules weren't always clearly spelled out. But there was one pair you'd never wear here, calcii. Closed shoes, often dyed red and fastened with straps that went all the way up the leg. They were formal and symbolic, meant for official ceremonies or walking in public, not for lounging around inside the Senate chamber. That would be like showing up to a pool party in chainmail. You could technically do it. But why? And besides, calcii came with baggage. You'd be expected to wear them with the white toga virilis and adhere to a whole litany of etiquette. Sandals, on the other hand, were low maintenance, breathable, and, let's be honest, pretty forgiving after a long lunch. Still, it wasn't just about comfort. Wearing sandals indoors said something subtle. It said, "I belong here." No need for pretense. No need to armor up. You've arrived, and the leather straps on your feet prove it. You take a step toward the bench, the slap of sandal against stone barely audible. That's the thing, Roman sandals didn't always have heels or thick soles. They were close to barefoot, but not quite. It gave you an edge in perception. You could feel the floor. You moved lightly. You glided rather than stomped. And while your ancestors might have walked barefoot across the 7 hills of Rome, you now walked in soft authority. Still, not everyone approved. There were cranky moralists, there are always cranky moralists, who sneered at the idea of public officials showing their toes. They wrote grumpy treatises warning about the feminization of Roman virtue. Too much exposure, too much comfort, too much Greek influence. Because of course, the Greeks wore sandals indoors all the time. And to Rome, anything Greek was both irresistibly cultured and vaguely threatening. Historians still argue whether these sumptuary grumbles were real concerns or just elite posturing. Some believe the laws were enforced sporadically, mostly to punish political enemies under the guise of morality. Others think they were widely ignored, like modern zoning regulations nobody quite understands until someone complains. But you know one thing for sure, nobody's stopping you now. Your sandals are simple but elegant. No gaudy colors, no excessive gold buckles. Just good Roman leather, likely from Spain or maybe North Africa, if your supplier was in a good mood. You look down. The straps are scuffed, but not frayed. That sweet spot between practical and polished. A senator walks past you, his sandals flapping with every step. You raise an eyebrow. Rookie mistake. Slapping sounds are the bane of respectable senatorial presence. A well-worn pair should almost whisper. Yours do. Naturally. You've broken them in during countless debates, strolls through the forum, and more than a few midnight walks after too much wine. Here's a quirky little secret most tourists don't hear. Rome had sandal snobs. Oh yes. Artisans specialized in subtle differences, straps that curved a certain way, soles that flexed with the arch. Some senators even requested personalized tread patterns so they'd leave a distinctive footprint in sand or dust. Not for tracking. For prestige. You sit now, folding your toga with an experienced flick, sandals peeking out just enough to be seen, but not enough to shout. There's etiquette to how you cross your feet. No foot-on-knee action. Keep the soles facing down. This is Rome, not a dorm room. Your aide appears beside you, a scroll in hand, eyes flicking downward for a second. He noticed your sandals too. It's unconscious at this point, an instinct drilled in since his first day. Because even though nobody enforces the rules, everybody plays the game. Still, there have been moments, scandals, really, when someone pushed the boundary. A famously eccentric senator once wore sandals with dyed red straps inside the curia, mimicking the color of consular boots. Oh, the outrage. You'd have thought he tried to crown himself emperor. He was jeered for weeks. Eventually, the fashion died quietly, but the legend lingered. That's Rome for you. The tiniest deviation becomes gossip fuel for a decade. You lean back, feeling the cool air of the chamber brush against your calves. Your toes wiggle slightly inside the sandals, not from nerves, just habit. The breeze swirls up from the open oculus above, carrying the faint scent of olive oil, parchment, and maybe, just maybe, the ghost of every senator who tiptoed through politics in sandals like yours. The rules. They're still etched in stone somewhere, sure. But what matters now is the rhythm. The glide. The softness of leather on marble. Your place in the hierarchy is worn into the sole of your sandals. And that's the real law here. Your toes curl slightly over the edge of the sandal's sole, just enough to remind yourself you're still here, still grounded, still part of this odd ballet of Roman politics. You glance down, casually, like you're checking for dust, but really you're surveying the message your feet are sending. Because in the Senate, even toes had something to say. You're not alone in thinking that. For senators, exposed feet weren't just tolerated, they were a kind of social shorthand. And you, my friend, are fluent. Here's the funny part. Back then, most people didn't wear sandals at all. Slaves, for example, often went barefoot. Soldiers wore sturdy boots, caligy, designed for long marches and kicking people into submission. Farmers had thick leather coverings, if anything, to protect against mud and thorns. The average Roman foot was a calloused, bruised, sunburnt mess. But yours gleam just a little. Because you're not average. You're elite. Sandals, specifically the kind you're wearing, open-toed, no-nonsense solii, weren't utilitarian. They were curated. Comfortable, sure, but above all, clean. You couldn't fake status with your shoes. Too many eyes were trained on them. That's why wealthy Romans kept slaves whose job was literally to clean and maintain sandals. Imagine that, someone whose full-time role is to make sure your left strap doesn't squeak. In public, the message was clear. Bare toes meant confidence. It said you didn't need protection from the ground, you were above the dust and muck of the plebeian world. And indoors, sandals became an emblem of relaxed superiority. You had nothing to hide and no one to impress. But still, people looked. Historians still argue whether senators were consciously using their feet as status signals, or if this whole toe-showing thing evolved over time into a cultural norm without anyone truly realizing it. But you know the truth. People gossip. And where there's gossip, there's intention. There were even etiquette manuals, dry little scrolls stuffed with guidance on how to walk into a room, how to adjust your toga without looking like a chicken flapping its wings, and yes, how to wear your sandals like a proper Roman. You'd never be caught dragging your feet or letting your heel flap. That kind of sloppiness belonged to street performers and drunk poets. And yet, even among senators, there were levels. You notice a man across the chamber older, with cracked heels and sandals so worn the soles barely holding together. Some would say it's humility. Others might whisper that he's stingy, or worse, falling from grace. It's hard to tell if it's fashion or failure. Rome thrives on that kind of ambiguity. It's what makes every meeting feel like a stage play. A man's feet could earn him applause or silent condemnation. A little further down the bench, another senator, a younger one, shifts uncomfortably. His sandals are immaculate, too immaculate. The leather is new, stiff, the color too rich. He probably thought he was making a good impression, but now it just looks like he's trying too hard. Rookie move. He hasn't yet learned that the best sandal statement is one of ease, not arrogance. Quirky fact time. There was once a brief sandal fashion among Rome's nouveau riche where people commissioned sandals with embossed gold stitching. Not the whole sandal, mind you, just the edges of the straps. They wanted something subtle but rich. It lasted less than a year before someone's pair caught fire during a lightning storm, and the trend burned out, literally and socially. You let your foot roll a little from side to side. No gold stitching here. Just honest wear. The heels slightly darkened from hours of standing, the straps softened where they cross your instep. These sandals have seen debates, storms, even a surprise toga wine spill that nearly took you off your feet in front of a visiting Greek envoy. But they've held on. That's what makes them respectable. Now, remember, this wasn't just about style. Roman society was deeply tactile. Touch meant something. Bare arms, bare legs, bare toes, they weren't just about temperature. They were expressions of readiness, alertness, even virtue. A man who was too covered was seen as either hiding something or pretending to be something he wasn't. But don't mistake sandals for weakness. In Rome, fragility was performative. Senators could look serene and soft at a distance, but they'd crush you with a few words delivered while gently adjusting their sandal strap. It was all part of the theater. You stretch your legs out slightly beneath your bench, careful not to scuff anyone else's. Proximity matters here. Power is spatial. And your sandals give you just the right reach. Not intrusive, but present. It's a dance, really. That's the thing modern audiences sometimes miss when they picture Romans. They imagine giant battles, shouting matches, and pounding fists. But most of the time, power moved in whispers, in glances, in the quiet squeak of leather on marble. In Rome, a well-timed shuffle could say more than a whole speech. Footwear was part of that language. Just like the folds of your toga or the way you carried your scroll, your sandals were a signpost. Were you humble? Ambitious? Stylish? Broke? Your feet told the tale. And while most senators wore basic solii, there were variations, little tweaks that only insiders noticed. Thinner straps meant you could afford replacements often. A higher arch suggested custom fitting. Slightly raised soles indicated you didn't have to walk far, probably had a litter waiting outside. Some even used scent, soaking the leather in oils to leave a trace as they walked. Olive, sometimes myrrh. You're not sure if it's overkill or genius. Probably both. Depends on the room. But the best part? No one talks about it. Not directly. You'll never hear a senator say, "Nice sandal game today, Marcus." But the looks, the quick flicks of the eyes downward, speak volumes. There's a whole foot-based vocabulary under the Senate's nose. Literally. You stand again, slowly, deliberately. The strap across your heel tightens for a second, then relaxes. And just like that, you're in motion. Quiet. Confident. A Roman in full. You're walking now, slow, measured steps echoing softly beneath the great stone arches. Not too fast. Never hurried. A senator never rushes unless Rome is on fire. And even then, there's an argument to be made for keeping one's composure while the world burns. Your sandals trace the same polished floors trod by generations of statesmen, Cato, Cicero, maybe even Caesar himself. And though no one left behind a signed footprint, you get the feeling they cared just as much about how they entered a room as what they said in it. Here's where it gets interesting. The sandals aren't just an accessory anymore. They're a transition. A bridge between the public mask and the private self. When you slip them on at the door of the curia, you're stepping into a role. Not a costume, but close. The open sandal says, "I am part of this elite. I speak for Rome. I breathe her laws. I stride with purpose, but not pretense." You glance to your left. There's a quiet little room, technically a waiting chamber, though everyone calls it the whisper room. It's where senators go to rehearse speeches or conspire, depending on who's asking. You remember your first time in there, toes curled nervously inside stiff new sandals, the scent of beeswax polish clinging to your soles. You barely spoke, and the moment you did, your voice cracked like a dropped amphora. Not anymore. Now you own your steps, own your silence. You've grown into your footwear, figuratively and literally. There's something oddly reassuring about feeling the cool floor beneath you, the gentle give of the leather molding to your movement. That's the part no one tells you. Sandals eventually become part of you. Like calluses and confidence. You pass under a high arch, decorated with reliefs of Mars and Minerva, and suddenly, the light shifts. Dappled sunshine filters in from an overhead oculus, casting long, strange shadows across the floor. One cuts across your path, and for a moment, your sandal lands in a band of gold light. The leather gleams. Not in a flashy way. Just enough to remind you that, yes, this is Rome. And yes, this is theatre. Here's your historical fact drop. Augustus, yes, that Augustus was known for his modest footwear. Never flashy, never embroidered. Despite holding more power than any senator ever would, he kept his sandals humble. It was all part of the image. The benevolent ruler. The first among equals. A man who walked softly, even as he restructured the republic. But fringe tidbit time, his personal shoemaker, a Syrian artisan named Labeo, rumored to use a secret olive oil blend to keep the leather supple and scent-free. Some say Labeo's sandals were so well balanced that they made zero noise on marble. Could have been myth. Could have been marketing. Either way, sandals had their own PR. And the symbolism didn't stop at silence. Roman sandals had a geometry to them. Most were flat, yes, but the strap placement. That was pure visual rhetoric. A diagonal cut implied motion. Symmetry implied discipline. Crisscrossed straps over the instep. An allusion to restraint. Senators knew this. They weren't just slipping on footwear, they were donning architecture. Historians still argue whether the strap patterns had formal meanings or whether we're just reading too much into leatherwork. But you've seen it firsthand. The way someone stands differently depending on how snug the sandal is. The way tighter straps can turn a relaxed walk into a stilted performance. Subtle, sure. But in Rome, subtlety is where all the secrets hide. You reach the edge of the central chamber now, where a few benches form a quiet semicircle. A place to watch, wait, reflect. You ease yourself down, the straps of your sandals creasing as your ankles bend. Across from you, a colleague, Lucius, probably loosens one strap and massages the arch of his foot with a tired sigh. He catches your eye, smirks. Long morning, he murmurs. You nod. Long sandals. It's a joke, sure. But not entirely. Because these aren't lounging shoes. They're made for standing, shifting, pacing, but always with dignity. And every senator has felt the sting of a poorly fitted pair halfway through a 4-hour debate. Blisters don't care about class. Lucius pulls a small cloth from his sleeve and wipes dust from the side of his left sole. Not because it's dirty, but because he knows he's being watched. Everything here is performative. Even the pretending not to perform parts. A younger aide walks past with a tray of fruit. His eyes flick quickly to the ground, habitual. Your sandals pass the test. Still tidy, still aligned, still worthy of your seat. There's a theory some modern scholars play with, that the Roman preference for open sandals wasn't just cultural, but practical. Body temperature regulation, they say. Rome's climate being what it is, sandals allowed for airflow, prevented foot rot, and minimized the risks of infectious blisters. Maybe. But you suspect it's more than that. This was about status, not sweat. A slave could go barefoot and still overheat. A laborer in boots would still stink. But a senator, you had slaves to clean your feet. You had access to imported oils and terracotta foot baths. Your sandals weren't just about keeping cool, they were about being above discomfort. You cross your legs at the ankle, just so. A sandal peeks out from beneath your toga. A conscious move. Just a sliver of leather and polished nail. Nothing more. Nothing less. And somewhere behind you, a door creaks. Another senator enters. You don't even have to turn. You hear his sandals slap the floor once, twice. Too loose. Too loud. You resist the urge to wince. Rookie. You know what'll happen. He'll get the side eyes, the subtle toe glances. Someone might even quip about walking like a Gaul in the atrium. The Senate is many things, but forgiving of fashion missteps. Never. You rise again, your own sandals whispering beneath you. Soft. Balanced. Precise. You've had them resoled twice already, but they still feel like an extension of your stride. And that's the goal, right? You don't wear the sandals. The sandals wear you into the heart of power. You step into the narrow corridor behind the chamber, cooler here, quieter. The echo fades a bit, replaced by the occasional flutter of a toga, the whisper of scrolls being unrolled, and your sandals tapping rhythmically on the stone. You're not rushing, just regrouping. Senators don't always move with purpose, but they always move with intent. That's a key distinction in Rome. You pause beneath a statue of a long-dead statesman, probably Gaius something, known for, well, the pigeons seem to know him best now. His marble feet are bare, oddly. Not a sandal in sight. Sculptors like to do that sometimes, depict people in their pure form. But you know the truth. No senator would show up barefoot unless he was trying to make a radical point. And even then, the Senate might just laugh him out of the chamber. There was actually a guy once, Marcius Plautus, who did just that. Came in barefoot to protest the cost of imported leather. Called it an anti-sandal statement. People talked about it for a week. Then he mysteriously got reassigned to some obscure waterway tax committee. Coincidence? Maybe. But in Rome, even your toes had to play the game. You flex your own now, quietly. The straps creak just a little. Not from wear, but from memory. These sandals have heard things. Secrets exchanged during nighttime walks through the forum. Alliances whispered behind columns. Bribes passed hand to hand, foot to foot. You remember once, waiting outside the tabularium for an urgent message. You were pacing, wearing an older pair of sandals with cracked soles, and someone important passed by. He looked at your feet before he looked at your face. And in that moment, you knew. Status isn't just worn. It's walked. Historical fact break. Roman senators weren't allowed to wear calcii, the heavy, enclosed shoes of magistrates inside the curia. Those shoes were for public show, ceremony, parades. Indoors, they had to switch to sandals. It was part of the unwritten code, leave your pomp at the door. Step in with humility, or at least the appearance of it. But here's the fringe gem, some senators cheated. They had convertible footwear. Seriously. Hidden snaps, removable tops, early versions of detachable loafers. Walk into the forum in full magistrate glory, duck into a side hallway, and pop, you're suddenly in sandals like a good Republican boy. It was absurd, a little theatrical. But hey, this was Rome. Half the Senate had secret compartments in their shoes, and the other half had secret compartments in their conscience. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or just a clever one-off by some stylish rebels, but you've seen the look, the faint red mark across the ankle where the upper shoe once clamped. Subtle, but it's there. You push open a small side door and step into a private courtyard, one of those tucked-away green spaces senators use to clear their heads. What it really means is, pace, rant, rehearse arguments, or vent about toga-creasing weather. The ground here is stone, softened by years of foot traffic and the occasional burst of moss. You step carefully. There's a bench nearby, worn smooth by restless old men and anxious young ones. You ease onto it, letting your legs stretch, sandals peeking forward. The sun filters through the olive branches above, warm on your ankles. And this is where it all comes together. Because Roman life wasn't divided into neat boxes. Everything bled into everything else. Your footwear wasn't just for walking, it was for speaking, listening, waiting, persuading. Those sandals might be quiet, but they were always part of the conversation. And here's a wild bit for you, sandal gifting. Yes, it was a thing. Senators would sometimes send sandals as political tokens. Not full pairs, usually just one. A symbol. An open invitation to walk together, metaphorically. Or a subtle nudge, get moving, support my motion. A left sandal meant urgency. A right one? Loyalty. Supposedly. The meanings were fluid, which made it all the more mysterious. And dangerous. You remember receiving one once, tucked inside a sealed scroll case. Left sandal. Worn, faint trace of perfume. You never found out who sent it. But the very next day, 3 senators voted your way who usually wouldn't have crossed the street for you. Coincidence? In Rome? Never. Lucius joins you in the courtyard, nods, doesn't speak. He knows this is your thinking spot. He drops onto the stone beside you, and together you sit in a silence that's almost comfortable. His sandal taps against yours once, just a nudge. You glance over. He raises an eyebrow. It's a question. You nod once. The answer. That's how deals are made in Rome. Not always with grand speeches. Sometimes just with a quiet moment, leather on leather, 2 pairs of sandals speaking volumes. And while we're on the subject, ever heard of sandal theft? No, really. There was a mini crisis during the late Republic. Petty thieves were targeting senators' sandals outside the baths. Not for resale, but as blackmail. You see, a senator caught barefoot in public? Instant humiliation. So the thieves would snatch one sandal, then send a note, pay up or limp home. Eventually, guards were assigned to watch over changing rooms. But for a few months, Rome had a sandal panic. You still don't trust bathhouses to this day. You glance at the path ahead, back into the curia, back into the buzz of politics. Your sandals are warmed by the sun now, straps softened even more. They smell faintly of lavender oil, courtesy of your fastidious footslave, who takes pride in keeping you just this side of fragrant. And that's when you realize, this whole sandal thing. It's not just about history or hygiene or class. It's about rhythm. A pace. Rome moves, breathes, argues, at a certain tempo. And your sandals? They're the metronome. You rise again. The leather creaks just slightly, almost like a bow before a performance. You brush your toga into place and step forward, back into the marble echo chamber of the Senate. And this time, you listen not with your ears, but with your feet. The hallway ahead curves gently, dimly lit by torches flickering behind glass shields. They cast long shadows that stretch like vines across the floor, reaching toward your sandals as if trying to pull you back. But you keep walking, each step a quiet announcement that you belong here, that you know where you're going. The soles of your sandals skim the smooth stone floor, not quite silent, not quite loud, just enough to say, I am present. That's how it works in the Senate. You don't shout your presence, you let the room notice it. Slowly. Around the bend, you spot them, 3 other senators, deep in quiet conversation. You know that huddle. It's the kind that precedes a surprise amendment or a cleverly veiled insult disguised as a policy suggestion. You veer just slightly, not to avoid them, but to give them space to notice you and maybe, just maybe, fold you into the conspiracy. But you don't rush it. You give them time to finish a sentence or exchange a meaningful glance. Then, you offer a small nod. They nod back. No words. That's all sandals and subtlety. Here's your historical fact. The Senate didn't have formal dress codes beyond the toga and those all-important sandals. But norms? Oh, there were plenty. You were expected to be clean, well-oiled, composed. And yes, your sandals had to be appropriate. No flashy gold stitching, no dyed leather unless it was a high holy day. Walking in with flamboyant footwear was like showing up at a funeral in circus paint. It didn't matter if your policy made sense, if your sandals screamed midlife crisis, your credibility was toast. But here's a bizarre tidbit for you. Some senators had lucky sandals. Like, actual designated pairs they only wore on vote days or for major speeches. One guy, Cassius Varro, reportedly owned a pair made from dolphin hide. Said they kept his thoughts sharp. Dolphin hide, though? You try not to think about how that was acquired. He claimed he could feel the Senate's energy through the sole. That's either mystical or mildly concerning. Historians still argue whether these lucky sandals were a real psychological edge or just fashion-forward superstition. Probably both. Knowing Romans, They'd sacrifice a goat and commission a poem just to win a committee seat. You reach the side chamber known as tablinum minoris, the little room where junior senators whisper big dreams. You remember when this room felt terrifying. Everything was sharper back then. The voices, the marble, the stairs. Your sandals back then were new, stiff, loud. They used to squeak, remember? That awful squeak that made people turn just to smirk. You glance down now, these current sandals, mold perfectly, move without comment. You've outgrown the squeak. Inside, a pair of younger senators are debating over tax reform, specifically, whether Sardinian grain should get tariff exemptions. It's a dull debate, but an important one. You lean against the doorway, arms crossed, just listening. They notice you, of course. One of them straightens. The other stops mid-sentence. "Thoughts, Senator?" One asks, trying to sound casual but clearly a little thrown. You stroll into the room, sandals whispering against the mosaic tiles, and offer only this: if your ideas are strong, let your sandals speak first. They both blink. You suppress a smile. You don't need to explain. They'll either figure it out or forget it. Both are fine with you. You move on, passing into the north wing where the light changes again. Here, there's a long colonnade that overlooks the Senate gardens, manicured, serene, intentionally distracting. A place for senators to compose themselves between debates or recover after a particularly biting insult. You walk slowly along it, pausing to rest a hand on the cool marble balustrade. A few other senators stroll nearby, all wearing sandals similar to yours, but not quite. You notice things now: the width of the straps, the softness of the leather, the faint sound of each step. One man's sandals slap too hard. Probably new. Another's barely make a noise, too soft. Probably due for replacement. It's like birdsong, really. Once you learn the patterns, you hear everything. There's something oddly vulnerable about the whole practice. Indoors, your feet are basically out for inspection. In a society obsessed with poise and presentation, exposed toes are a gamble. A stubbed nail, a scar, a little foot sweat. Scandalous. You've seen senators mocked ruthlessly for having peasant heels. One time, a guy stood up to make a passionate plea about land redistribution, and someone shouted from the back, "Fix your heels first." That was the end of the speech. And possibly his political career. So yes, Roman senators wore sandals indoors. But it wasn't for comfort. It was high-stakes theater. You turn back from the colonnade, walking slowly, deliberately. Your sandals slide perfectly in rhythm with your gait. There's a bench ahead, just beneath a faded fresco of the goddess Concordia. You sit down, letting the cool stone seep through your toga. Across from you, a young assistant tries desperately to light a scroll lamp with trembling hands. First try fails. Second too. Third, there it is. And for a moment, you see yourself in him. The nerves, the pressure, the wish to be invisible yet noticed. You want to tell him to breathe. Maybe even offer some wisdom. But that's not how Rome works. You can't teach someone to walk in these sandals. They have to wear them. Scuff them. Earn them. You shift your weight slightly. The sandal bends, breathes with you. It remembers. The way your voice cracked during your first speech. The time you fell asleep during a finance debate and your right foot twitched loudly enough to wake you up. The time someone complimented your sandals mid-argument and threw you off your rhythm entirely. And here's the final truth of the day: for senators, sandals aren't fashion. They're function. But not just walking function. They're emotional function. These sandals carry memory, weight, expectation. And unlike boots or shoes, they offer no armor. You wear them barefoot, bare-soled, bare-intended. You stand again, straighten your toga, and walk toward the main chamber. Quiet. Confident. Your sandals know the way. You re-enter the curia, the air just slightly cooler than before, though it's hard to tell if that's the marble floor or the mood shift. A heated debate has taken root. Senators are circling, some seated, others pacing like caged philosophers, with raised brows and curled lips. You can tell instantly, it's a land issue again. It always comes back to land. Your sandals hit the floor with calm precision. The sound is measured, clack, pause, clack, not loud enough to draw attention, but deliberate enough to remind them you're there. That's the trick in Roman politics. You don't always need to speak to be heard. Your feet know their place. The third row from the dais, just behind Senator Livia Cornelia, sharp-tongued, steel-eyed, and owner of the only known pair of purple-dyed sandals in the Senate. An indulgence no one dares question. She claims it's grape juice stains. Everyone pretends to believe her. You lower yourself onto the stone bench, legs folding automatically beneath your toga. Your sandals slide forward, aligned with the smooth floor. There's a kind of pride in that small, almost invisible gesture. Your feet are positioned just so, steady, unshifting. You don't fidget. That's for junior senators still trying to impress their mentors with overeager shuffles and knee twitches. Now, the man speaking, Senator Vibius, is pacing, as always. His left sandal squeaks faintly every third step. You're not the only one who notices. Across the chamber, two older senators exchange the faintest smile. Not mocking, exactly, just amused. In Rome, even your shoe noises could become political liabilities. Here's your historical fact. The Roman curia had near-perfect acoustics. Built intentionally so a whisper could carry across the floor, it meant that sandals, often considered low on the sound hierarchy, were suddenly front and center. The click, the scrape, the pause before standing, all of it was part of the Senate's language. Now the quirky bit. Roman children were trained to walk in sandals silently. Yes, part of their basic education. Not to be polite, but to avoid detection. There were myths about assassins identified not by their weapons but by their footsteps. In some families, it was a point of pride if you could glide silently through a room in sandals, no slapping, no creaking, no friction. You've trained yourself to do both. Make noise when you want to. Vanish when you don't. Historians still argue whether senators consciously used their sandals to signal support or opposition. There's some evidence, letters, mostly, that subtle shuffling or foot tapping during debates may have acted as an informal vote cue. Like a Morse code of leather and toe flexing. One senator even claimed he could read the chamber just by the movement of heels against stone. Back to Vibius. He's pacing harder now, a vein throbbing near his temple. His sandals are worn, maybe too worn, his soles catching slightly as he turns. You wonder if he's trying to wear them down on purpose. Some senators believe scuffed sandals give them credibility. A man of the people sort of aesthetic. You personally think that's nonsense. A senator's job is to walk carefully, not heroically. A sudden voice breaks in, Livia Cornelia. She rises smoothly, sandals silent, not even a whisper of friction. Her purple soles flash once, then vanish beneath the folds of her toga. She doesn't pace. She pivots, one foot anchored, the other toe angled just enough to suggest dominance without aggression. And then, her voice. Calm. Measured. She slices through Vibius's bluster like a marble chisel. You don't catch every word, but the room responds. There's a soft rustle of fabric, the sound of shoulders straightening, a few senators leaning slightly forward. She's winning this one. You glance down again. Your own sandals have shifted slightly forward during the exchange. It's unconscious. A lean of interest. A pull of attention. Just leather, cord, and thought. Funny how something so simple could be so revealing. You sit back and scan the room. Dozens of sandals, all different. Thick-soled ones, likely custom-made. Thin-strapped ones that suggest vanity or agility or both. Some polished to a shine. Others dull, dusty, indifferent. One senator across the aisle has sandals that don't match. You tilt your head, mildly intrigued. Not many would dare that. Either a statement, or a mistake. And then you remember, it's Senator Flaccus. He claims to wear one Greek-style sandal and one Etruscan to show unity in diversity. Most just think he misplaced one pair in the baths. In the row ahead of you, a younger senator is fidgeting, his foot bouncing, heel clicking softly against the floor. It's distracting. Livia notices too. She pauses mid-sentence, glances down, then raises an eyebrow so delicately it should be preserved in marble. The boy flushes, stills his foot, and tries to vanish into his toga folds. You smile, barely. There's a rhythm to these things, a dance. And while it may seem ridiculous to outsiders that such importance is placed on footwear, in Rome, everything has layers. Your sandals are tools, signals, symbols, and most importantly, extensions of your voice when silence is smarter than speaking. Another senator rises, Lucius again. This time, he limps slightly. You know that limp. It's not real. It's his sympathy limp, which he pulls out when trying to secure votes for anything remotely tied to veterans. His left sandal has a reinforced heel to fake the imbalance. Clever. Desperate, but clever. The debate rolls on, shifting like weather, now a storm, now a fog. You remain still, watching, listening, breathing through the soles of your feet. Your sandals flex slightly with each breath, hugging your arches, grounding you in this absurd, beautiful theater of marble and men. And then, the bell. A low tone rings from the far end of the chamber, signaling the end of the session. No final vote today. Just noise, tension, and about 8 semi-public grudges that will fester until the next meeting. You rise, sandals clicking softly. Not too fast. Not too slow. Measured, as always. And you wonder, as you leave the curia, in another life, would you still have chosen sandals? Or would you have gone barefoot and changed everything? You leave the curia through the western arch, the late afternoon sun spilling across the stone like a golden carpet. It's warm, comfortably so, and the air smells of cypress and distant olive smoke. Your feet, still clad in their well-worn sandals, adjust instinctively to the texture of the street outside. Gone is the smooth, cooled marble. Now it's the coarser flagstone, uneven and full of character, just like the forum it surrounds. There's something strangely grounding about this transition. Inside, every sound is measured, every movement coded. Outside, the rules soften a little, and sandals can simply do what they were built for: walk. A breeze dances around your ankles, cool and unbothered, and for a moment, you simply listen. The gentle shuffle of fellow senators leaving the session. The crunch of small gravel beneath passing carts. Somewhere off to your right, a merchant sings about pickled radishes. Loudly. You head toward the steps at the edge of the forum, where the Senate's shadow ends and the city begins. There's something freeing in this in-between space. You're still wearing your toga, yes. Still a senator. But here, amid the comings and goings of Rome's ordinary chaos, you're not the focal point. You're just another sandal wearer trying not to trip on a stray cobblestone. Here's your historical fact for today. Roman roads were designed to last centuries. Engineers laid them in layers, stones, gravel, sand, so durable that some routes still exist today. But that didn't make them comfortable. Those legendary roads? Yeah, more like stone punishment for anything but sturdy sandals. That's one reason Roman sandals evolved to have thick leather soles and layered insoles, no cushion, but decent protection against surprises like jagged stone or, say, lost goat teeth. Yes, That's the quirky tidbit. Goat teeth were common street litter. When goats were slaughtered, many of the inedible parts, like teeth, ended up swept into gutters and tossed into alleyways. A surprising number of archaeological digs have unearthed piles of them near forum drains. Step carelessly, and your sandal could gain an uninvited, crunchy passenger. You pass a young patrician boy struggling to keep up with his mother, his oversized sandals slapping against the ground like fish out of water. The straps are too loose, the sole flopping with each frantic step. You remember that feeling, how hard it was to look dignified when your shoes refused to cooperate. Every Roman learns, sandals that don't fit are more than a fashion crime, they're a sign of chaos. And chaos? That's unacceptable. Especially when your public image is your currency. Historians still argue whether the type of sandal worn signaled political alliances. It seems petty, but plausible. One camp swears that conservative senators preferred the calcii repandi, a slightly curved toe design, while reformists favored flatter soles. Others think it was more about region than ideology. Or maybe it was just personal preference. But in a city where gossip moves faster than chariots, who wears what and how is rarely dismissed as coincidence. You reach the steps and descend slowly. The city unfolds before you like an endless performance, bakers hollering, dogs barking, and a street performer pretending to be Jupiter by yelling "I demand wine" at passers-by. You sidestep him, sandals tapping softly. As you walk, you think about all the feet that have come this way. Soldiers, philosophers, runaway slaves, ambitious merchants. And yes, senators like you, thinking about taxes, treaties, and whether their left sandal might finally give out on the walk home. Because sandals in Rome were both equalizers and dividers. Everyone wore them, but not all sandals were created equal. A senator's pair, like yours, had soft insoles and fine stitching. A plebeian's, usually rougher leather, less shaping, fewer repairs. And the enslaved? Many went barefoot, or wore cast-offs with broken straps tied together with twine. You notice a repairman seated beneath a fig tree, surrounded by piles of soles and sandals in various states of distress. He's squinting through the afternoon light, threading a fresh strap through a battered heel. His fingers move quickly, practiced. You watch him for a beat too long, and he catches your gaze. With a knowing grin, he lifts a freshly restitched sandal. "Senator," he calls. "Yours need a tune-up." You smile and wave him off. "These old things still whisper like new." He laughs, nods, and returns to his work. And yet, you consider it. There's a crack near your left toe strap, barely visible. You noticed it this morning but ignored it, like a senator ignores a bad omen until it bites. Maybe it is time. But not yet. You keep walking, turning toward the northern path that winds behind the Temple of Saturn. The path is quieter, lined with tall stone walls and occasional bursts of purple flowers sneaking through cracks. Here, the city hushes just a little. The stone underfoot is finer, almost polished from centuries of sandals smoothing its surface. You think again about the idea of status through sandals. It's subtle but real. Just like speech, word choice, rhythm, tone, your feet speak too. Do they rush? Do they shuffle? Do they pause before crossing thresholds? You recall an old trick you learned from a retired senator. Never enter a room first, and never let your sandals echo alone. It sounds cryptic, but what he meant was this: don't be the loudest presence in silence. Let others fill the space before you make your mark. And if you do make noise, make sure it says what you want it to. A bird flutters past overhead. You look up to see two pigeons land on a statue, one of Augustus, arm raised in eternal command. You wonder what sandals he wore. Probably something custom. Maybe lined with imported wool. Or embroidered with little laurel leaves, because of course. You approach the final turn before your domus. The familiar squeak of the garden gate up ahead, the scent of basil and hot clay, the rhythm of sandals slowing down as you near home. You pause at the door, lift your foot, and wiggle the sandal off gently. First the left, then the right. Your soles sigh in relief. Your feet press softly against the cool tile of your entrance. You've made it through another day. Walked the halls of power. Tread carefully across politics and gossip. And you did it all on 2 stitched slabs of leather tied to your feet. Not bad, considering. You step inside, barefoot now, the cool tile floor greeting your arches like an old friend. The air smells like lemon water and laurel oil, a quiet contrast to the city's sun-baked stone and market spice. You walk slowly, toes curling slightly as they meet the polished mosaic. Your sandals, loyal companions for the day, rest near the door. You don't look back at them. Not yet. The domus is quiet. Slanting evening light pours in through the open atrium, painting gold on everything it touches: columns, polished vases, the subtle curve of a marble bust you've always meant to move but never quite do. Somewhere in the kitchen, someone's chopping something. You hear the dull rhythm of it echo faintly. But for now, it's just you and your tired feet. You pad across the floor toward the small side room where you usually unwind. A small bench, a jug of wine, and an open scroll you keep rereading even though it never ends how you want. You don't sit yet. Instead, you ease down to one knee, run your fingers along the inside edge of your sandals, just to check. The crack in the left strap is worse than you hoped. It's not just frayed. It's splitting. You sigh and lean back. Repair it tomorrow. Or the next day. Maybe you'll take it to that grinning man under the fig tree. Or maybe you'll do it yourself. You used to, once. Before Senate appointments, before all the walking that wasn't metaphorical. Here's your historical fact for the evening. Roman citizens were often expected to repair their own sandals. Even senators. It was considered part of a good man's disciplina, self-reliance. There were cobblers, yes, and sandal shops. But patching up a broken strap yourself? That earned you quiet respect. A senator with clean hands was often suspect. One with ink-stained fingers and sandal tools in his drawer? That was someone the people trusted. You think about the repair, how you'd need to soak the leather, not the sinew, thread it just so. And then you remember the time your strap snapped in the Senate. A disaster. You'd tried to walk across the floor with one foot flapping like a wounded duck. Not your best moment. Livia Cornelia had laughed, just once, but it echoed for weeks. And here's your quirky detail. Some senators carried emergency thongs, extra sandal straps, in hidden pouches sewn into their togas. Yes, actual emergency sandals. Like a backup necktie, but more practical. One satirical poet wrote that a truly prepared man wore more leather on his body than a legionnaire, and none of it armor. Historians still argue whether this was common practice or just literary exaggeration. There's evidence of hidden compartments in some togas, but it's hard to say if they were used for spare sandal parts or, say, bribes. Or snacks. The Roman Senate wasn't exactly known for its catering. You finally sit on the bench. Stretch your legs. Run your palm down your shin, feeling the indent where the sandal strap has pressed all day. You wonder, again, why sandals never changed. Why no one tried boots indoors, or slippers, or anything different. But then, the answer's obvious. You wore sandals indoors because that's what you were supposed to do. Custom was law in Rome, sometimes more powerful than the actual law. And besides, sandals made sense. Easy to slip off. Hard to hide weapons inside. And if someone stormed the curia, you could run in them. Barely. There was even a short-lived Senate rule requiring sandals be visibly worn in the chamber. No tucking feet under togas. Why? Because of a rumor. A minor conspiracy. Someone tried sneaking a dagger in strapped under a boot. The rule lasted 3 months, then quietly disappeared. Too many people got cold toes. You sip from the wine jug and let your head tilt back against the wall. You remember what your father told you once: the world walks on sandals. Don't forget it. At the time, you thought he meant something deep. Now, you think maybe he was just annoyed you'd scuffed his good pair. The candlelight flickers, soft and amber, casting shadows like water ripples. You close your eyes and imagine all the feet, all the sandals, all the journeys that passed through this house. Your father's. His father's. Even yours, back when they were small and callus-free. There's comfort in that continuity, however ridiculous it may seem. A man's sandals are more than footwear. They're history collectors. Dirt gatherers. Whisperers of where you've been, how fast you ran, how long you stood still. You hear the soft slap of feet on tile. A young voice calls your name, your nephew, probably. He rounds the corner, wide-eyed, holding up something in both hands. Your sandal broke, he says solemnly. You glance down. Not yours. One of his. The thin little sole bent in the middle, strap half torn. You smile and gesture him over. Come here. Let's fix it. You reach for the toolkit tucked behind the bench, a few needles, some thread, a bit of sinew. His eyes widen like you've produced gold. You know how to fix sandals? He asks, incredulous. You shrug. If you wear them long enough, you learn. He sits cross-legged beside you, holding the broken sandal like a wounded animal. You thread the needle, soften the leather, begin the slow process of bringing it back to life. Your fingers are older now, stiffer, but they remember. They always remember. And just like that, you're part of the line again. One more Roman teaching one more Roman how to keep walking. Because someday, he'll wear those into the curia. Maybe his sandal will creak. Maybe not. But if it does, you hope he wears it with pride. You finish the last stitch with a quiet tug, then smooth the repaired strap between your fingers. The leather feels warm, still pliable, like it remembers what it's meant to do. You hand the sandal back to your nephew, and his grin is all tooth and awe. He slides it on, wiggling his toes, testing the fit. Then he walks in a circle on the mosaic floor, slow at first, then confidently, the small slap of his soles echoing gently through the room. That should hold for a while, you say, brushing leather dust from your lap. Just don't outrun any chariots. He snorts. I'll try not to. And then he's gone off to report to someone, probably bragging about how the senator fixed his shoe like some kind of sandal wizard. You let the silence return, heavier this time, the air cooling as dusk takes over the courtyard. You lean back again, stretching out your legs, feeling the raw sensation of skin that's been freed from leather. Soft, almost too soft. Exposed in a way that makes even the richest senator feel like a barefoot child sneaking figs from the pantry. That's the thing about sandals, they hide just enough. Just enough to say, I'm civilized, but not so much that you forget where you stand. They connect you to Rome. Directly. Constantly. You feel the street, the floor, the threshold. The city whispers under your heels all day, and when the sandals come off, it's like removing an instrument you've played for hours without noticing. Now for your historical fact. Roman sandals, especially those worn indoors, weren't only functional. They were often scented. That's right. Some senators would dust the leather with powdered myrrh or rose oil before entering the curia. Not only did it help mask the, well, natural consequences of walking all day, but it was also a power move. Smell was status. If someone passed you reeking of imported cinnamon bark, that wasn't accidental. That was bragging. And here's a niche detail you'll love. The wealthiest Romans sometimes commissioned sandals with tiny bells sewn into the straps. Delicate ones, designed not to jingle too loudly but just enough to announce their wearer in a hush. Imagine walking into the Senate chamber with the faintest musical tinkle at your heels. It's dramatic. It's a little extra. It's Roman. Historians still argue whether this was a gendered fashion or one of those fleeting trends that popped up in particularly theatrical households. One record mentions a senator who banned his household slaves from wearing anything that jingled unless performing a festival dance. Another scroll, less formal and more sarcastic, laments that the Senate has become a chorus of metal fleas. No one agrees on whether it was ever cool, but clearly, someone thought it was necessary. You stand again, joints groaning slightly, and glance back toward the front room where your sandals still rest near the threshold. You walk barefoot to them, inspecting the frayed strap one more time. It's worse than it looked this morning. Not catastrophic, but definitely a liability. You turn them over, heel to toe, then carry them into your study. You set them on the work table where you keep scrolls, styluses, and now, apparently, shoe thread. You light a small oil lamp, the glow casting long shadows across the sandals. They look tired, but dignified. Like a retired legionary who still sharpens his sword just in case. And maybe they are. They've been with you through speeches, votes, scandalous rumors, and awkward banquets. You once walked all the way from the Aventine to the Senate in them during a riot because you were determined not to let a little civil unrest ruin your attendance record. As you examine the stitching, your mind drifts to an old friend, Lucius, who once swore his sandals were cursed. Every time he wore a particular pair, something went wrong. Lost votes, spilled wine, a pigeon incident too horrible to retell. He finally burned them in a small ceremony that involved chanting, expensive oil, and exactly 3 senators who were far too tipsy to object. The truth. Romans believed in that kind of thing. Footwear omens. There are written accounts of augurs, those creepy bird-reading priest types, refusing to begin a ritual if someone's sandal was facing the wrong direction. Even gladiators were said to have pre-battle sandal rituals, like stepping into the right one first or whispering a name into the straps. You take a moment to run a finger along the heel indent of your own. It's shallow, worn perfectly to your step. You press your thumb into it and realize, it's more than a groove. It's a map. A subtle cartography of everywhere you've walked. Every stumble. Every weight shift during a difficult decision. Every pause before saying something you couldn't unsay. You remember a moment years ago when a senator you barely knew pointed at your sandals and said, "You stand too heavy on your left." You favor it. You were annoyed. Then you realized he was right. It's a habit from a sprain years before. It never healed perfectly. And somehow, that flaw has been etched into your soles ever since. You sigh, then pick up the left sandal and begin the slow, careful work of stitching. You loop the thread through, tug it taut, knot, test. Again. It's meditative. Quiet. You lose time in it. The sandal softens in your hand. It seems to thank you. Eventually, you finish. You hold it up, squinting in the dim light, then set it beside its pair. They're ready for another day. You leave them there and move toward your sleeping quarters. The house is darker now, the only sound a soft drip from the fountain in the atrium. You pass a sleeping dog curled on a mosaic of Poseidon. He snores gently, one paw twitching. In your bedroom, you sit on the edge of the low couch, brushing dust from your feet. You think about how tomorrow, when you walk into the courier again, no one will notice your repaired strap. No one will ask. But you will know that you fixed them. That they're whole again. And maybe that's the entire Roman game, walk like you belong. Even when you're patched together. Especially then. You wake before the sun, the air still cool and still, like the world is holding its breath. Your feet touch the stone floor, and there's that sharp intake of sensation, cool, slightly rough, grounding. Before anything else, your eyes drift to the sandals resting near the doorway. The left one, newly repaired, sits with a subtle lean, like it's waiting to be judged. You pick it up, turn it over in your hand. The strap holds. A little uneven, but strong. Honest work. You slip them on, feel the leather hug your feet like an old friend you only half trust. Then you're moving, slowly, out toward the courtyard, where the fountain murmurs and the first birds begin their half-hearted warm-up chirps. The sky is still ink blue, but fading fast. You love this moment. The not quite night. Rome hasn't started groaning yet, no carts, no shouting, no clang of coin against counter. Just the city breathing in. You pour water from a clay jug into a bowl, rinse your hands, splash your face. You pause, then pour a little over your sandals. Why? You don't know. Habit, maybe. Or superstition. Or maybe you're just rinsing away yesterday's dust. Rome is made of dust and noise, and both cling to you like gossip. Now here's your historical fact. Most Roman senators began their day with a ritual called salutatio. That meant greeting their clients, basically the long line of people who depended on you for favors, handouts, or just the appearance of being connected to power. You'd sit on a stone bench, sandals freshly tied, posture perfect, while a procession of men in worn tunics came to bow, flatter, or plead. And yes, they looked at your sandals. The quality of your footwear said as much as your toga. Well-oiled leather, symmetrical straps, no dried mud. That meant discipline. Sloppy laces. Sloppy senator. Everything was signaling. Rome ran on optics as much as roads. You remember once early in your career, a man complimented your sandals with just enough sarcasm that it sounded like praise and insult at once. He said, "Ah, you tie them with such republican humility." You never forgot it. You also never wore those sandals again. Which brings us to a more absurd detail. Some senators had sandal servants. That's right, a designated person just to tie and untie their shoes. Not just slaves in the generic sense, but specialists. One satirical playwright referred to such a servant as the loop lord, mocking how senators would stick out their feet like royalty, expecting perfect tension and symmetry in every knot. Your neighbor had one. You always thought it was ridiculous. Historians still argue whether sandal servants were common or just another status game among the ultra-elite. Some evidence suggests they were more prominent in later imperial Rome, when everything got more theatrical, hair higher, shoes fancier, egos inflated like parade balloons. But records from the late Republic hint at similar trends. One wax tablet even lists a servant's duties as morning sandals, midday fan, evening scroll turner. A whole resume, and step one was tie shoes. You tug your own straps tight, flex your foot. The knot holds. You do your own tying, thank you very much. Part pride, part paranoia. You've seen too many men trip over poorly secured sandals and too few live it down. You walk out into the street as the city begins to rustle. A fruit seller arranges figures, a man argues with his donkey. The paving stones are cool, even under your soles, which are now tougher than leather themselves. You pass other men in togas, all performing the same ritual, the quick downward glance. A sandal check. You do it too, of course. You can't help it. One man has a sandal with red-dyed straps. Bold move. Another walks with a limp, and you clock the heel wear. You wonder, did he tie it wrong? Or did life just bend him that way? You stop briefly near a column and scratch your calf with the edge of your foot. Just above the ankle strap. That itch never goes away. Rome is made of marble and mystery, but mostly it's made of things that rub you raw. As you near the forum, the pace quickens. More senators, more robes, more quiet foot slaps. You spot Marcus Verus, always overdressed, his sandals so new they squeak. You nod. He nods back. Neither of you comment on the squeaking, but the judgment is palpable. You take your usual route toward the curia, weaving through early merchants and bored guards. And there, tucked into the wall near the main gate, is a small alcove shrine to Mercury, the god of travelers. Not uncommon. But this one's special. Because this Mercury? He's wearing sandals. Real ones. Not stone. Someone once carved the statue with tiny notches in the feet, and generations of visitors have wedged offerings into them. Coins, flowers, even a tiny sandal made of bronze. You always stop here. Just for a second. You nod at Mercury. You adjust your strap. It's a ritual now. Less about gods, more about rhythm. Walk, pause, nod. Walk, pause, vote. You are not religious, not really, but if you were going to ask anyone for a favor, it would be the guy with wings on his ankles. And here's your favorite part. A fringe theory suggests that this very shrine was once part of an underground sandal cult. No, really. Some say a group of senators met in secret to praise Mercury, share sandal designs, and swear oaths of truth while barefoot. The evidence is thin, mostly graffiti and second-hand jokes in old plays. But wouldn't it be great if it were true? Historians still argue whether that theory holds any water. One says it's plausible, another calls it a fever dream from a guy who drank too much mulled wine and read Cicero sideways. Still, every time you pass the shrine, you think about it. You finally arrive at the curia. The guards nod, and you ascend the steps slowly, the sound of your soles echoing in the chamber's hollow entry. Inside, the benches are still mostly empty. You choose your usual spot. Not too close to the front. Not too far in the back. Just close enough that when you cross your legs, people see your sandals. You settle in. Adjust your robe. Feel the faint squeeze of the strap across your instep. You made it. Again. And not just physically. You made it through. Because every day you arrive in those sandals, repaired, adjusted, maybe a little ridiculous, you're still standing. Still walking. Still Roman. You sit quietly as the curia begins to fill, one slow footstep at a time. The sounds are subtle, heels brushing marble, fabric rustling, the occasional cough from someone pretending they're not nervous. But you're not listening for voices right now. You're listening for shoes. A soft slap of well-worn soles, probably Cassius, who's never replaced his since Cato's funeral. The click-click of someone with iron hobnails on their sandals, a total faux pas indoors, but Lucullus insists it improves posture. And then, the worst sound of all, squeaky straps. You try not to react as Marcus Verus shuffles past again. Still squeaky. Still smug. Maybe he thinks the squeak is charming. Maybe he thinks it makes him memorable. Either way, your foot involuntarily curls inside your own sandal, as if your body is physically rejecting his poor taste in leather. But here's something most people don't know. Roman senators weren't just wearing sandals. They were making political choices with every step. The kind of sandals you wore, indoors or out, spoke volumes. Were they local leather or imported? Did you wear them tied in the old Republican style, or had you adopted that newer, slightly scandalous cross-strap look favored by younger senators? You're old school, mostly. But even you once wore the diagonal tie just to see if anyone would comment. They did. Your historical fact for today: sandal fashion was actually regulated in Rome, especially within the Senate. There were certain designs, like the calceus patricius, a type of red leather shoe reserved only for the highest-ranking nobles. Senators, by law, wore a specific version of the calceus closed-toe shoes fastened by 4 leather straps and dyed black, usually paired with white tunics bordered in purple. But, and here's the wrinkle, when they were indoors, especially during private Senate meetings or at home in the atrium, many chose to return to sandals. Why? Comfort, yes. But also because shoes were performative. Sandals were personal. And that's where things get interesting. Because even though the formal law required certain footwear in public and ceremonial spaces, enforcement was spotty, especially as the Republic edged toward empire. Sandals began to creep back in. Literally. One scroll preserved in Herculaneum includes a marginal note from a scribe who attended Senate proceedings. Several men wore open sandals today, despite custom. The room smelled of oil and garlic. That last bit might have been editorializing. But let's go further. Among your colleagues, sandal choice has become a quiet rebellion. Lucius Minorus wears ones he claims are Phoenician. A bold move. Publius the Younger uses gold-plated buckles. A stupid one. And there's always that rumor that Aulus, the old goat, goes completely barefoot in secret sessions, claiming it helps him hear the gods through the stone. Nobody's confirmed it. Yet. Now for the fringe detail. There's a long-standing superstition among older senators that if your sandals creak before a vote, the gods disapprove of your decision. Yes, really. Entire speeches have been postponed over a suspicious squeak. Once, during a debate on grain tariffs, one poor soul's sandal whined every time he shifted. Afterward, he was ostracized for bringing misfortune into the chamber. He claimed it was just a loose strap. But Rome remembers. Historians still argue whether this superstition had any real basis or if it was just another form of social control. Some believe senators deliberately tampered with rival sandals, loosening straps or subtly wetting the soles to embarrass them. Others think it was all just paranoia and the natural outcome of wearing footwear made from the hides of very annoyed cows. You stretch your legs under the bench, crossing one ankle over the other, the sandals flexing just enough to be comfortable. A few others do the same. It's not a signal, but it feels like one. Like a shared language no one speaks out loud. Every twitch, every foot tap, every strap adjustment, it all means something. You catch the eye of a younger senator across the room. His gaze drops to your sandals, then back to your face. A quick nod. Respect. Or maybe curiosity. He's new. He's still figuring out what's important. He hasn't yet learned that a single stitch out of place can cost you an ally. You remember your first month here, sitting nervously in borrowed sandals, the straps too tight across your toes. You bled after the first session. But you didn't dare complain. Not then. You walked home, sandals full of dust and blood, like a soldier returning from a war no one acknowledged. The speaker calls the session to order. You shift in your seat, plant your feet flat on the floor. The sandals settle quietly. No squeaks. No creaks. Just readiness. As debate begins, you barely listen. Your ears are tuned elsewhere. You count foot movements. The subtle heel pivots of boredom. The toe taps of disagreement. The sudden stillness when someone's about to interrupt. It's like watching a field of grass swaying in a breeze that only you can feel. Then something unexpected. A sandal slips off. A man 2 rows ahead of you, Decimus, has lost his heel strap. His foot wriggles. He tries to adjust it discreetly. Fails. There's an awkward moment. A few heads turn. He blushes. And you smile to yourself. Because it happens to everyone eventually. Here's the thing, in the Curia, power doesn't always speak through words. Sometimes, it slaps quietly against stone with every step. Sometimes, it stumbles and has to be retied. But always, it's worn. As the session grinds forward, you begin to sketch in the margin of a wax tablet just a doodle. A sandal. With wings. Mercury's feet again. You wonder how fast he could run. The meeting drags, as they always do. You lean back just enough to stay alert without letting your spine turn to wax. Your feet rest squarely on the cool stone floor, and your sandals, they hold. The straps hug like quiet companions, neither loose nor choking. A senator's dream. Or at least, your version of one. Outside, the sun climbs lazily. You feel it in the light creeping across the mosaic floor, inching like some kind of ancient snail that delivers warmth instead of slime. Your eyes flick to the sandals of the man next to you, Lucius. His toes wiggle, the leather dry and cracked. Amateur mistake. He didn't oil them this morning. You can practically hear the straps pleading for mercy. Someone sneezes. Another senator groans. Still no vote in sight. Now, let's pivot slightly, because while you're mentally counting sandal blisters in the room, let's talk about a much more domestic dilemma, the scandal of sandals in the Roman household. Yes, even at home, your footwear choices carry consequences. Once upon a time, not long ago, you wore the wrong pair of sandals in your own atrium, and your sister-in-law gasped like you'd stabbed a Vestal virgin. Turns out, there was an unspoken rule in her family: no cork soles indoors. Too Greek, she said, as if cork itself whispered foreign propaganda. So here's your mainstream historical fact: Romans divided footwear by social space. Indoor sandals were simpler, lighter, softer, often with thinner soles that whispered across the marble instead of slapping it like a fish. These were called solii, and they weren't just casual, they were a kind of footed sigh. People slipped them off with ease at the triclinium, the dining room, where reclining to eat barefoot became an act of leisure and trust. If you kept your sandals on, you weren't relaxing. You were plotting something. But don't be fooled. These indoor sandals were still part of the performance. Hosting a dinner? You better believe someone was checking whether you'd buffed the strap buckles. If your slave boy handed you dusty sandals at the threshold, game over. Your guests would spend the evening whispering about your priorities, wondering if your wine was watered down too. Fringe tidbit incoming: some senators actually had sandal closets. Whole little chambers dedicated to organized racks of solii and calcii, with labels carved into the shelves. One surviving example from a villa near Pompeii has tiny inscriptions above each space: meeting, garden, library, and our favorite, emergency. What that pair was for, no one knows. The mind races. Historians still argue whether these sandal closets were common or just another symptom of the absurd wealth hoarded by Rome's elite. Some archaeologists believe the majority of Romans, even wealthy ones, only kept 2 or 3 pairs. Others point to lavish frescoes showing hosts offering sandals to guests as a sign of opulence and thoughtfulness. That's right, custom guest sandals. Like some twisted spa day. Back in your own home, you've dabbled in this trend. Just last week, you bought a pair of sandals with inlaid lapis lazuli beads, totally impractical, mildly dangerous, and so beautiful it made a dinner guest audibly gasp. Did you wear them indoors? Of course. For 20 minutes. Before your dog chewed one and tried to bury it in the fountain basin. But that's the thing about indoor sandals, they invite intimacy. They signal that you're off duty, at ease, maybe even vulnerable. And in Rome, being vulnerable in front of the wrong person was like putting a gladiator in a ballroom and asking him to waltz. You have to know your guests. You remember one evening, dinner with a man from Hispania. He arrived in boots. Actual, dust-covered marching boots. The entire table froze. Someone dropped a figure. He claimed his luggage had been misplaced, but you knew the truth, he was making a point. He wasn't here to lounge. He was here to conquer. That dinner ended with a silent standoff over the breadbasket. No one won. You shift in your seat, the straps of your sandals pressing gently into your skin. You think of your atrium back home, sunlight streaking through the oculus, the little fish mosaic you keep stepping on, the sound of sandals dropping to the floor like punctuation marks in a very quiet poem. There's comfort in that. Familiarity. A rhythm. And yet, even at home, sandals carried risk. You knew a senator once who tried to host a barefoot banquet, claimed it was closer to the gods. Someone tripped over a discarded sandal, shattered a wine jug, and landed on a bowl of stuffed dormice. The story outlived him by decades. You sigh. Here, in the Curia, sandals may signal discipline and hierarchy. But at home, they're about how you curate your version of Rome. Whether you lean toward tradition or flirt with eccentricity. Whether you dare to walk barefoot into the garden under the moonlight, or whether you slip on that soft pair of goat leather solii with the velvet lining. Yes, velvet. Don't judge. You've earned it. And now, as the first vote of the day is finally called, you place both feet squarely on the ground again. You feel the texture of the worn leather. A little slick. Slightly warm. Like the sandals themselves are paying attention. You rise slowly. No squeak. You glance at Marcus Verus. Squeak. You smile. The sandals you wear today have seen many meetings. They've trodden through triumphal arches, stood motionless through senatorial shouting matches, and once kicked a marble footstool clean across the chamber during a particularly heated tax debate. Still, they hold together. Mostly. One stitch in the left toe is starting to pull. You'll have it fixed tomorrow, or never. It's hard to say with you. But today isn't about stitching or meetings or even subtle squeaks. Today is about ritual. Because here's something most people miss when they think about Romans in sandals. It wasn't just about fashion or comfort. It was about belonging. And nowhere is that more obvious than during sacred ceremonies, those somber, elaborate, sometimes slightly absurd affairs where even your feet had a script to follow. You step outside the Curia into the blinding Roman afternoon. The heat hits you like a pillow fresh from the sun's furnace. The marble underfoot is hot enough to cook a snail, and for a moment you're grateful your sandals have thick enough soles. Some poor fool near the archway forgot his and now dances in place like a startled goat. Today's ceremony is a minor one, honoring Concordia, goddess of harmony. A few senators have been sniping at each other over boundary laws, so someone in the priesthood thought it'd be poetic to stage a public ritual. And that means formal tunic, laurel crown, sacrificial goat, and ceremonial sandals. Your historical fact: in Roman religion, there were specific rules for what footwear was appropriate during various rituals. Priests known as flamines, especially the Flamen Deiles, the high priest of Jupiter, were forbidden to wear knots or anything that could be tied. That meant no laces on sandals. Why? Because knots were thought to trap spiritual energy. A tied sandal could metaphorically bind the soul during a sacred act. So instead, ceremonial sandals were often slip-on, sometimes fastened with golden clasps or, if you were really trying to impress, tiny pins carved from ivory. You've seen some of these up close. In one temple, a preserved pair was found tucked behind a statue pedestal, embroidered with small pearls. No one knows who they belonged to. Perhaps someone left them as an offering. Or maybe they slipped off during a particularly moving prayer and were quietly forgotten. Either way, the souls bore nowhere. Maybe they were never even walked in. Imagine that a sandal made for a god, never meant to touch dirt. You tie your own sandals carefully today, noting the irony. You'll be attending the ritual, but not officiating, so the no-knot rule doesn't apply to you. Still, the old priest, Marcus the Creaky, will absolutely glare at your double loops. He always does. His sandals look like they were carved from bark. As you make your way down the Via Sacra, others join the procession. The usual mix: senators, scribes, temple assistants, and gawkers. You note their footwear automatically. A few sandals still wet from rushed polishing. One poor soul forgot his ceremonial pair and walks awkwardly in civilian calcii. The shame will follow him for weeks. Now for your quirky tidbit: Roman augurs, those who interpreted the will of the gods by watching birds, often performed their readings barefoot. Not for comfort. Not even for practicality. They believed that connecting skin to earth allowed divine messages to flow uninterrupted. There's a legend about an augur who wore sandals lined with silver and misread the flight of a raven, declared war on a province that didn't even exist. The Senate was not pleased. Silver sandals went out of fashion for a decade. You reach the Temple of Concordia, where a small crowd has gathered. The ceremony begins. Incense curls upward like lazy fingers. The goat looks unimpressed. The priest drones something about unity while flicking wine across the altar. You've seen this exact ritual at least 15 times, but you still find yourself watching the feet. Everyone shuffles at some point. One senator trips slightly on an uneven cobblestone, drawing a soft titter from the crowd. His sandal, bright red, way too flashy, skids briefly before he recovers. You suspect he'll switch to a more respectable pair next time. Or, more likely, double down out of spite. Historians still argue whether footwear during ritual was more about symbolism or spectacle. Some insist that sandals reflected purity, clean leather, well-ordered straps, modest design, all meant to show reverence. Others believe it was just another display of wealth and status, with religion used as an excuse. As usual, the truth is probably both. The ceremony ends. The goat is led away, still alive this time, small mercies. People begin to disperse. You remain for a moment, watching sandal prints in the dust. Half-moons, loops, zigzags. Each one tells a small story. One pair dragged slightly, old man knees. Another stamped too firmly, probably nervous. Yours. They land evenly, quietly, as always. You walk home slowly, weaving past food stalls and laughing children. One boy points at your sandals and whispers to his brother. Maybe he recognizes the design. Maybe he just thinks you're rich. Either way, the sandals do their job, they speak without words. You pause at the base of the Capitoline steps, gazing out at the city. The sun lowers, casting long shadows. Even those shadows wear sandals now, etched into the cobbles by 1,000 daily walks. You think about the people who'll never see them again, whose feet once trod here but left no prints behind. And tomorrow, you'll put them on again. Not just because it's tradition. Not just because you're a senator. Because this is Rome. And sandals, ridiculous as it sounds, are part of how you carry it forward with every step. You stand in your vestibule, just inside the threshold of your domus, as a slave kneels beside you with a soft cloth. He gently wipes dust from your sandals, the ceremonial pair, still smelling faintly of incense and old goat. You resist the urge to kick them off immediately. These ones always take a minute to untangle. The clasps are fiddly, more for show than for practicality. You sigh and bend to help. The evening settles outside. The city breathes slower now, no longer puffing smoke or barking orders. You can hear distant flute music, somewhere between calming and slightly off-key. Someone's throwing a dinner party. You're not invited. Good. You've had enough ceremony for one day. Your feet are free now, bare on the cool tile. There's a quiet kind of pleasure in that. You wiggle your toes and walk into the atrium, trailing your fingers along the painted wall. You pass your sandal rack, 12 pairs, all neatly aligned, with one slightly askew. You fix it. It matters. Now here's the final insight, and possibly the most intimate. Sandals, in Rome, are not just about status or decorum or ceremony. They're about memory. They're archives for your body. Every worn spot, every loosened strap, every frayed edge tells part of your story. That pair you wore when debating the grain tax. The sole still has a wine stain from when you stomped out of the forum in the rain. The soft leather indoor pair. They're scuffed from the time you dropped a wax tablet in a fire and stepped in to fish it out, brave, stupid, probably both. Mainstream fact here: sandals were often passed down in families. Fathers to sons. Worn by boys in their toga virilis ceremonies the moment they became men. One surviving will from a senator in Etruria includes detailed instructions for sandal distribution. My black-soled pair to Gaius, my eldest, the saffron-trimmed to Marcus for religious days, the worn pair for Lucius, may he learn humility. The message is clear: these weren't just objects. They were legacies. But now for your fringe detail: some Romans believed sandals held residue of the soul. Yes. Especially after death. It was common to place them at the foot of the body on funeral pyres. Some families even burned only the sandals, claiming that was enough to carry the spirit skyward. Others buried sandals alone, sometimes with notes. One inscription from a child's grave reads, "He walks ahead. May these carry him well." Historians still argue whether these acts were symbolic, spiritual, or simply sentimental. Was it superstition, or something closer to love? Hard to say. But here, in your own quiet home, you're inclined to believe in love. Or at least in the comfort of worn leather and good stories. You light a small oil lamp near your bed and sit on the edge of the couch, feet dangling, sandals lined up beneath you like soldiers off duty. They've walked the marble halls of power. They've danced at feasts. They've kicked pebbles down long country roads while you tried to remember a senator's name. You smile, suddenly, thinking of the first pair you ever wore, too tight, badly stitched, and the color of a dried apricot. You thought they made you look important. You tripped constantly. The boy you were didn't know much. But he knew enough to lace his sandals before walking into the world. And that's the truth about Roman senators and sandals. They didn't just wear them indoors because it was practical, or fashionable, or even traditional. They wore them because to walk barefoot in power was unthinkable. Because sandals gave just enough protection to move through cold marble and hotter tempers, but still left your feet close enough to feel the truth beneath them. You never forget the floor when you wear sandals. You feel the tremble of a voice before it rises. The cool of silence before a vote. The thrum of footsteps that matter. So tomorrow, you'll do what you always do. Wake up. Step over your sleepy dog. Pick a pair. Maybe the soft ones. Maybe the arrogant red ones. Maybe, if it's cloudy, those cork-soled Greek ones that scandalized your sister-in-law. Just for fun. And you'll walk into your day as a Roman does, purposeful, sandaled, and fully aware that your feet are history's quiet witness. And now, as your eyes grow heavy, think about the slow hush of ancient Rome at night. The marble streets cooling under the stars, the sandals set neatly by the doorways, some still warm from evening walks. A gentle breeze moves through the olive trees beyond the city walls, their branches rustling like soft whispers. The lamps flicker lower, one by one, and the hush becomes complete. In the homes of senators, servants quietly gather the day's clothes, straighten scrolls, and draw the curtains. Somewhere, a sandal squeaks softly as it's removed, a final exhale of effort. In the quiet courtyards, cats tiptoe between columns, and water trickles in small fountains, weaving its way into dreams. You can imagine yourself lying there too, on a couch near an open window, a light linen blanket drawn across your legs, the air brushing your skin like a memory. Your sandals rest nearby, still carrying the shape of your day, but tomorrow, they'll begin again. They always do. Your body softens, breath slowing with the rhythm of Rome at rest. There is nothing left to decide, nothing urgent to remember. You're safe here, cradled in a time that moves slower now, wrapped in stories and moonlight. Sleep comes gently, like a well-worn sandal slipping off without a sound. So go ahead, close your eyes. You've walked far enough tonight.